Hey guys, my name is Tomato Anus, and this is a speedrun to overdose Mama Murphy in Fallout 4. If you're unfamiliar with the game, one of the main factions that you can side with are the Minutemen, and in the Minutemen, there's an NPC named Mama Murphy. Mama Murphy has a pretty unique role in the story of Fallout 4. If you talk to Mama Murphy after you rescue the Minutemen from the Museum of Freedom, you'll get a side quest called The Site. This quest mostly consists of talking with Mama Murphy, giving her some drugs, and then she tells you one of her visions, which more or less is just heavy foreshadowing on different parts of the main storyline. Some of these visions actually help you out in the main quests, with one giving you damage reduction against a tough enemy, and a couple others providing hidden dialogue options that you can use later on to avoid fights. As you complete this quest, you'll end up finishing it in one of two ways. One is that you convince Mama Murphy that she really shouldn't be taking all these drugs and that she should go clean. The other possible outcome is that you continue to give Mama Murphy these drugs and she eventually overdoses and dies. And that's exactly what the goal of this speedrun is. Give Mama Murphy the goods and in exchange she rips in peace. As always, if you'd like to watch this run with the original audio from my stream as I did this run live, or if you'd like to watch this run with only game audio, there are links in the description below. Hopping into the actual run, you may notice that the game is being played in German. That's because in this speedrun, we only really do the intro and we don't complete the actual game, and German is the fastest language if you're only playing the intro. If you play the full game, French is the fastest, but we're only going to be exiting the vault and giving Mama Murphy the drug, so we don't really care about the rest of the game. The appearances of Nate and Nora don't matter at all for this speedrun, but I picked the Asian and the redhead because that's the couple that I personally ship. However, when I was picking these presets, I was cycling through the faces a lot, and that's because as you create your character, Codsworth roams the house, and if you speak with Codsworth when he's walking back to the kitchen from the bedrooms, you save about half a second to a second. So I cycle through the character presets in a specific pattern that I came up with that perfectly times out Codsworth's position so we always get to save this second. The pre-war house segment doesn't actually really consist of many speed strats, all we do is speak with people as they start talking to skip their dialogue. When the Vault Tech rep arrives at our house, we get a chance to assign our special stats. For this run, we just want to max out agility and endurance and then dump the rest into luck. The reason for this is that agility and endurance are the two special stats which directly affect the amount of time we can sprint for. The rest of our points went into luck because none of the other special stats would actually benefit us in the speedrun, and luck is physically the fastest stat to dump any remaining skill points into. As typical of Fallout 4 speedruns, this game is ran on the very easy difficulty and also is performed on the 1.1.30 patch, which is one of the very first patched versions of the game. In addition to this, no mods or DLC were installed when performing this run. There really isn't much speed tech in the intro to Fallout 4, so I'm just going to skip forward a little bit to when we get into the vault. There are a couple major glitches coming up that I'm going to need to fully explain. In the meantime, I hope you enjoy my riveting gameplay of Super Mario 64. If you're curious, I am playing on an actual Nintendo 64 and capturing my gameplay with an IO Data GV USB 2. Now, with an end goal of overdosing Mama Murphy, there are a couple things we need to take into consideration. One is that Mama Murphy is a little bitch and will only take one drug at a time, with a 12-hour span needing to be passed between taking her next drug. This being a speedrun, we want to find a way to pass this 12-hour time span in as quickly a manner as possible. The obvious solution is to just sit down in a chair and wait for 12 hours, but doing that takes a long time. Instead, what we do in the speedrun is fast travel to a location far enough across the map that when we fast travel there and back, at least 12 hours will have passed. The only issue with this is that we need to discover a location a far distance away, which would typically take a lot of time to run to. Luckily, as a speedrunner, we have two major glitches that we can use to travel a far distance in a very short span of time. These two glitches are punch warping and cover sliding. While similar in effect and results, these two glitches are very different. Punch warping is completed by attempting to melee attack something with VATS while you stand behind an object that you normally wouldn't be able to walk through. Naturally, the game has a hard time pathfinding for how to put you next to your target. This means that there's about a 1 to 2 second delay from when you confirm your attack on your target until you actually teleport to next to it to actually hit them with your baton or whatever melee weapon you have equipped. If you quit out of VATS while the game is thinking about how to put you next to your target, the game will actually store the coordinates of where you are standing, which completes the action of setting up a punch warp. The next time you attempt to melee attack an object in VATS, you'll then get teleported back to the coordinates of where you were standing. This means if I set up a punch warp inside of Vault 111 and then trigger the punch warp out in the wasteland, I'll get brought back to around the coordinates of where I set up the punch warp in Vault 111, but I'll be in the corresponding coordinates inside of the Commonwealth. Typically, setting up a punch warp inside of an area corresponds with around the center of the map in the Commonwealth by Green Tech Genetics. Cover sliding is very similar, but instead of using VATS, we instead use the cover mechanic inside of Fallout 4. If you stand behind an object and aim down sights at the corner, you'll peek around the corner. If you stop aiming and enter third person at the same exact time, you'll break the animation of aiming around the corner and your coordinates will be stored similar to how they are with punch warping. Similar to how we trigger punch warps by melee attacking in VATS, cover slides are triggered by being in first person and taking out our gun. The big difference between the two though, are that punch warps seemingly teleport us to our end location, while cover slides slingshot us, meaning that we can bounce off of objects along the way and in turn makes it more inconsistent. However, this also means that we can discover locations along the way while we cover slide, where typically you won't be able to with punch warps. Also, if you were wondering, during this entire time I was trying to get the 100 coin star inside of TikTok clock, and I did end up getting it later on in the stream. Now that we have those two major glitches explained though, we get to see the run really begin after we exit the cryopod. In Fallout 4, you can use items to climb over walls by looking down and walking backwards while holding an item under your feet. This is typically known as item climbing or clipping depending on how you get through the wall, but in the vault we use cones for this, which we refer to as VLC clipping. In the vault, our main goal is to pick up both the security baton to set up a punch warp, and also to pick up a 10mm pistol so we can set up a cover slide at the end of the vault. You may be asking why we use a security baton instead of just using our fists to set up a punch warp, and the reason for that is that it's faster to have a security baton to hotkey rather than having to menu into your Pip-Boy to unequip your pistol. In the vault, we set up the punch warp by standing between some boxes at a wall and targeting some rad roaches, and then we just item clip into the elevator room, completely bypassing the Pip-Boy. In Fallout 4, if you manage to exit the vault without picking up the Pip-Boy, the game will automatically give it to you, but it'll be invisible unless you quit to the main menu and then reload your save, or you enter power armor. Additionally, because we don't actually pick up the Pip-Boy, that means we don't do the animation where we dust off the screen, which means that we still have a really dusty screen on our Pip-Boy, so if the screen looks cloudy at all when I'm navigating the map, that's why. While we wait for the elevator to descend, we quickly set up a cover slide in this corner, and then we enter the elevator and exit the vault. Once we're out of the vault, we need to trigger our cover slide, but we can't trigger it right from the vault pad, because that means that we're at too high of an elevation to actually survive the fall damage when we land. Instead, we head down to some rocks on the nearby cliff and then trigger our cover slide. As I said before, you can discover locations while you cover slide, and on this one we discovered Sanctuary, which is perfect because that means we save 17 seconds later on. This time is saved, where later on we just fast travel to Sanctuary as opposed to having to fast travel to Vault 111 and then run down the hill and discover Sanctuary on foot. Earlier, I said there were a couple things that we needed to keep in mind when running this category, and the second one that I failed to mention earlier is that we need to get 5 different types of drugs for Mama Murphy. Unfortunately, drugs spawn randomly in containers all across the wasteland, so as with most first world countries, there isn't really a way to get them all legitimately. Instead, after landing our cover slide, we head right over to Red Rocket and enter the workshop menu because we're going to be doing a glitch that will continually restock a container that spawns chems. While in the editing menu, if you pick up a table that a chem container is on and then exit the workshop while still holding the table, then it'll restock the container that's on top of the table. We do this over and over until we get all 5 drugs that we need to give to Mama Murphy. These 5 drugs we need are Med-X, Mentats, Psycho, Jet, and Buff Out. After we have all the drugs, we're able to leave our makeshift meth lab and head down to the Museum of Freedom. Along the way, we want to be careful with how we spend our action points because we want to make sure we have enough right when we discover the Museum of Freedom to trigger our punch warp, because you do need AP in order to use VATS. As we attempt to conserve our AP, we pull out our pistol and kill a couple raiders along the way, which saves us time down the road. We don't actually need to kill all of these raiders outside the Museum of Freedom because these ones aren't actually tied to any quests that we need to advance. But it is nice to kill them just to avoid any snafus later on where they would interrupt our ability to fast travel. Once we discover the Museum of Freedom fast travel point, we trigger our punch warp on a nearby raider and fall underneath the map while we punch warp. While falling, we look north and walk backwards, which will cause for us to spawn right next to Green Tech Genetics. We then run to Green Tech Genetics to discover the fast travel point, quit to the main menu, and reload our save. As I mentioned before, our Pip-Boy is invisible until we quit to the main menu, so we do this so that we can then fast travel back to the Museum of Freedom. Also, the reason why we did this to discover Green Tech is because Green Tech is the location that we're going to be fast traveling to and from in order to progress the game clock 12 hours so that Mama Murphy will take her next drug. Once we arrive at the Museum of Freedom, we kill the remaining raiders just so we can fast travel safely later on and then enter and kill the raiders inside. Along the way, we lockpick and take the fusion cell so we don't have to backtrack later after we talk with Preston and Sturgis.
Ich helfe gern. Bitte, erzähl weiter.
Vor einem Monat.
Tut mir leid. Klingt hart.
Dank.
Eine gute Idee kann einiges bewegen.
Auf dem Dach ist ein abgestürzter Vertibird. Alt. Vorkriegszeit. Hast du...
Gefällt? Klar. In Ordnung. Minigun. Das wollte ich...
Klingt, er kann.
Ich helfe gerne, wenn ich kann.
Aber...
Ich...
Na dann, okay.
Vorsicht, Kind.
After saving the Minutemen and talking with Preston and Sturgis, we exit to the roof and enter our power armor. Before we actually rip off the minigun though, we kill a raider across the street on a roof with our pistol because Preston doesn't have the best aim. Not saying I do, but Preston's is for sure worse. Before we rip off the minigun, we put away our pistol. This is because if we have out our pistol when we take the minigun, we'll automatically have the minigun out. The minigun is very slow to run with, so naturally we want to avoid having it out for as long as possible. Once we have the minigun, we then have to take out the Deathclaw, followed by any remaining raiders in the street. After clearing out all obstructions to Euphoria, we then fast travel back to the Museum of Freedom and ditch our power armor. Inside, we speak with Preston and Mama Murphy and let them know what we did.
Mit der Ruhe, Mama. Alles okay?
Alles gut, Preston. Mach keinen Aufstand.
Das war wirklich erstaunlich.
Das beruht auf Gegenseitigkeit.
Man kann nie...
Aha, gern geschehen. Jederzeit.
Dann komm doch mit.
Okay, Garvey. Ich bin dabei. Sag es mir bitte. Ich muss es wissen.
After we speak with one of two token black men in the game and the old hag, we then fast travel to Green Tech Genetics, followed by fast traveling to Sanctuary. The reason we fast travel to Green Tech first is because we have to pass enough time to allow for the Minutemen to arrive at Sanctuary. Once we're at Sanctuary with the Minutemen, we actually have to initiate a dialogue with Preston before we speak with Mama Murphy. If we don't do this, then when we try and talk with Mama Murphy, she won't actually speak with us. After we talk with Preston real quick, we can give Mama Murphy her first drug, and then she requests that we build her a chair.
Früher einmal gelebt.
Aber das
Hier, hab schon welches.
ganz in
Klar. Hey,
Ich muss dich um einen Gefallen bitten, Kind.
klar. Ich helfe gern.
Danke.
In Ordnung?
After building her a chair, we can then fast travel to Green Tech and back, skipping the time that it takes for her to walk to the chair, and also the cooldown on her ult, Take Drugs. We then spend the rest of the run alternating between giving Mama Murphy her drugs and fast traveling to and from Green Tech. Every time we give her her drugs, we have to be sure to actually finish the dialogue of her going through the site, followed by some precautionary warning of like, I don't feel so good, kiddo. If we don't actually go all the way through the dialogue and we fast travel away before she gives that precautionary line, then the next time that we talk to her and give her a drug, she'll say the last precautionary line she was supposed to say. In total, we give her 5 drugs, meaning that there's 5 precautionary lines, with the 5th one being the one where she dies. Say you fast travel away early to skip one of them, say the 3rd one. Then when you go and give her the 4th drug, the precautionary line that she gives you will be the 3rd one in order that she's supposed to give you. That means when you give her her 5th and final drug, she'll give you the 4th precautionary line and not the one where she dies. Because you can only give her 5 drugs total, that means that you'll never get the 5th precautionary line, which is the one where she dies. So in order for her to actually overdose, we need to be sure to sit through all of her dialogue every time, but really it's only a second or 2 lost each time, because we just mash through everything very quickly. Along the way, she'll occasionally start saying a random line when we try and talk to her that we want to skip. All we have to do is shoot her once in the leg and it'll skip this line for us. The run officially ends when Mama Murphy says her last line and dies. After she dies, we celebrate by parading her body around to show the Minutemen and giving them pecks on the lips with Mama Murphy's dead body. In all, this speedrun is a pretty funny idea, but there really isn't actually much to it beyond the surface level idea of it. The one thing that's very cool about it is being able to do that chem respawn glitch that isn't in any other Fallout 4 speedruns. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed this kinda different speedrun. The next heavy commentary video is going to be a long one, probably around an hour 45 in length, so I'll see you guys then. In the meantime, I've been Tomato Anus, and I hope you have an above average day.